Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to Yascp, your African supply chain podcast. I'm your host, Stella Jaqueta. In this podcast, we discuss various topics that affect my beautiful, your beautiful, uncomplicated African supply chains. And in this podcast episode, we'll be talking about how does a global supply chain professional look like? And I couldn't have a better guest because he has so much experience when it comes to supply chain field and supply chain environment in a global perspective. So let me introduce you guys to Kim Winter. So let me tell you a little bit about Kim. He is the founder of Logistics Executive Group. Kim delivers 40 years of executive leadership experience spanning from executive search and recruitment, leadership development, executive coaching, corporate advisory, consulting and mergers and acquisitions, media interviews and vodcasts across the supply chain, logistics, 3PL, e-commerce, life science, cold chain, FMCG, retail, maritime, defense, aviation, resources, and industrial sectors. He is a regular contributor of thought leadership to industry and media, is a professional Master of Ceremonies, frequently invited to chair and moderate face-to-face international events and media. So when it comes to global supply chain leadership, Kim is your guy. He knows it. So welcome, Kim, to the podcast. How are you doing?
Della, thank you so much. That's an enormous welcome, and it's taken me back in many, many years of my history. So I'm doing just fine, and thank you for having me on your show.
No, it's wonderful, Kim. I'm so glad that we have connected since the last interview talking about Mozambique, and I've learned so much, even from the tips that you have given to me. It's amazing. Your experience just shines through. And Kim, just to get started, I'd like to ask you to give us a little bit of your background in terms of Logistics Executives Group. How did it started? Why do you think that it was so necessary to have this company nowadays?
Well, okay, good question. So it takes me back again many years. I was in Australia and I'd just been involved in the sale of a business from New Zealand. Originally had a trucking company when I was younger, and then we put together a company in Australia in 1999, so 45 years ago. Recruiting, we had a lot of people in supply chain that I knew, and put a team together, started recruiting in that space. There were very few, if any, specialist recruiters around in those days. So we started recruiting mid to senior level roles in Sydney, right across, as you mentioned, supply chain logistics, third-party logistics, aviation, ocean, e-commerce, life sciences, cold chain, FMCG, defense, retail, just about everything, but specialized within logistics and supply chain. So soon after, in the early 20s, expanded into Singapore, Hong Kong, Shanghai, India, and Dubai, where I happen to be today. Now, we've got most of our corporate advisory team, which I'll talk about later, here, and quite a few of our recruiters here at Dubai as well. So very, very much customer-driven, actually. We got pulled into different companies in different areas by customers we originally started with in Australia.
Oh, nice. Interesting. And Kim, you've mentioned about the recruitment. And could you please talk about what sort of roles that you typically recruit in terms of supply chain and logistics?
Sure. Well, right throughout the entire end-to-end supply chain, and logistics is part of that, of course. And we specialize in very much right across around from the most senior positions right up to board positions. So PMs, also VPs, director level roles, regional managers, country managers, right across the various levels that we've mentioned. And we have teams working on mid-range roles as well. So distribution center managers, transport managers, and one thing and another. We have teams based in Asia, in Australia, and here in Dubai. We have a small business down in Kenya, which we can talk a little bit about later as well. So those are the sort of roles that we work on, but there's specific things that we're looking for, obviously, when we're talking to clients to make sure we understand 100% what the customer is looking for before we start our executive search business.
Yeah. And Kim, in that sense, I often hear on research and articles, they talk about lack of supply chain talents. There's not enough, especially when you go higher up in the C-level, C-suite level. Do you agree with that, that there is a lack of talents of supply chain leaders in that sense? Or is it a fallacy? People are just not looking at the right place.
Good question, Stella. There's no fallacy. It's a thing. Shortage of supply chain and logistics for talent has always been there. Of course, it's a big statement to make, but we've noticed, particularly if we talk about recent times, particularly since the pandemic, and a lot of people, for whatever reason, lost their jobs or were looking at different options. A lot of people made money out of property and they wanted to go and work from home. Or a lot of candidates, obviously, a lot of employees now got used to working from home or working at a hybrid situation. So for companies and many of those in logistics and supply chain that do need people on deck, and there's a big move to getting people back, even in tech now, back into the office, there's a particular shortage. So we're seeing, even though there are recessionary times floating around the world, there is definitely a demand for many, many verticals and specifics and levels within the supply chain itself.
Oh, interesting. And now, Kim, going back to the executive search and recruitment, what sort of tips can you give to professionals in supply chain and logistics? Like it can follow through practically when they want to put themselves there and expose themselves to the global market.
Okay. Well, that's a very poignant question, Stella. And, one of the most important things I'll talk about online, obviously, because over the last few years when people haven't been able to deal directly face to face, it's been very important that their online profiles are up to scratch and are optimized. But before I talk about that, I just want to talk about resumes. Now, a lot of people will say resumes aren't so important these days. You don't need to email resumes. The online profile is enough. Most of the clients that we have at C-level want to see a complete resume. They also want to see profiles online as well. We'll talk about that in a second. But for a resume, it's very important for me when I'm presenting candidates to tier 1 or tier 2 clients around the world to make sure that resume is targeted towards the role. And what I mean when I talk about targeted, it's that the candidate understands the position description very, very clearly, and that they are making sure that what is included in the CV is going to be relevant, both in terms of experience, cultural background, anything that they think is important to the client that's in the PD, make sure that's in there and highlighted. Not highlighted in so many words by putting highlights on things, but to make sure everything is in there that needs to be in there. So targeted CV, making sure that there's keywords in there. If people are using AI in their HR departments, or if a recruiter is using AI, as we do, make sure there's some objectives in there about what you're wanting to do with your career. Make sure there's a section at the end with hobbies and interests, community activities, because holistically, most HR executives and line managers are looking for more the complete person, rather than the technical skills, which must be in there, of course, the experience, the technical skills, the hard skills, but also information about what sort of background the person's got, any behavioral traits that they've got they want to put in there, social media contacts that they've got so people can reference that. And then references available on request. Never put references in there unless the referees are happy to be broadcast high and wide. Most aren't. So references on request, so those can be provided. And then, of course, I mentioned about online profile. Very important to make sure whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter, whatever somebody's using, and LinkedIn, of course, very important these days, that matches by and large your resume. A lot of people don't update one or the other, and clients can often look at that and say, well, is this person being honest, or are they just being lazy, or what's going on? So that's important, and making sure that there's as much accurate information without being overt and putting too much information into a LinkedIn profile. But all the relevant background, the their history, education, so people can do a verification on that if they wish.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in nowadays, really, it's important for us to be on LinkedIn. It's really the first stop the person has in terms of who you are online. How do you present yourself? And if your LinkedIn is not on point, it just tells something about you. And
Absolutely.
yeah, Kim, I have a curiosity. Let's say someone now, they want to change the area they are working on. They want to change their career. For example, they are moving from procurement or they're moving from distribution. They now want to do innovation and they want to do, let's say, HR, right? Something completely different from their industry. How can they go about telling that story that they want to shift, even though their CV is telling another story?
Okay. Yeah, good one. It's an interesting one, but one that we deal with quite often. And in fact, we had a board meeting with our Australian operation last week, and they are getting a lot of inquiries from people wanting to transition between career verticals, if you like, as you're saying. So there's a couple of really common sense things here that I would convey. And one of those is if you're employed in a business where you're looking to want to transition into different areas, and obviously the larger the company, the easier this is to achieve, is to actually put the hand up with HR or the line managers there to say you'd like to explore, to make those intentions known and to do the work and to be able to move to request movement between different areas in the business. If that is not available for whatever reason inside an organization, then definitely recommend that the person goes and starts doing some study. They might be LinkedIn studies if they can afford to go to INSEAD or Harvard for a specialist course or wherever it might be, or the local technical institute, anywhere that they can get the extra education as qualified technically, is do the study, do the work. And whenever I'm making any recommendations for anybody in the area of career development or recruitment, it's do the work. Looking for a job is a full-time job. Wanting to change and transition between a job to another one is a full-time job. So we've got to put in the extra hours. There's no substitute for hard work, Stella.
Yeah, interesting. And Kim, I like what you said. Looking for a job, it's a job in itself, and you have to put the work and you have to do the work. Don't just sit down and wait for the door to be open. You go and open the door for yourself, because in our days, it's by violence. You have to take it. If you don't take it, it's not going to come by. And Kim, talking into that, I want to know about networking. And we constantly hear about the power of networking. There's books about networking. Can you explain why is it so essential, especially in supply chain and in logistics, to be actively networking?
Yeah. Well, I think, look, my experience is, the last 40, 50 years is in logistics and supply chain, as you know. And, what we decided when we first set up this business in Australia, 1999, was to be seen and be active in contributing to our community. So in those days, it was Logistics Association of Australia and the Supply Chain Logistics Association of Australia. So we joined and became members and contributed and presented and shared data and information, and our corporate advisory business and our consulting businesses, both in Australia, Asia, and here in Dubai, regularly public research, information, news, views. We have our own podcast channel as well, as you know. We're doing interviews all the time with people all over the world. And, the idea is to be sharing. Networking is one thing. To gain information, that's fine. But what we found successful is, reciprocity. Reciprocity being, doing something for others without any expectation of something in return. And that has incredible benefits just for the soul, nothing else. But the rule of karma tells us that, generally speaking, I've found this to be the case in my life, is the more you do for others, the more circulates back to you and circulates back to you. And and it makes your life more complete and holistic. So in terms of logistics and supply chain, there are so many different ways to network. So starting online, joining my recommendations for people who want to network, get into the industry or expand their profile in the industry, expand their knowledge or develop their career, is get in amongst as many industry associations, join different specialist groups all over the world, because we're a global community now.
Exactly.
Much is talked about the expansion of the world, and the one world is diminishing because of nearshoring. I think to a large extent that's rubbish. That the logistics and supply chain world will continue to expand and become global. We all rely on different services, different countries, different companies, different organizations, specialisms all around the world. So network, go to events where you can. You know, I've been at 4 events in the Gulf in the last month. I've got another 3 events in APAC in the next 2 months or 6 weeks. Be there. There's nothing better than meeting colleagues in the industry, sharing information, getting to hear the stories, storytelling of what's happening in the industry. But at the same time, contribute online. If you're on LinkedIn, share information, share research, share comments. And, you know, you don't need to go to LinkedIn course 101 to tell you how powerful that can be by contributing and sharing and liking and commenting. The same thing applies to face and faces. There's never going to be a replacement for face-to-face contact.
Exactly. And Kim, even one of the reasons why I started my podcast is to find my tribe, to find people who love supply chain, who have a passion for supply chain and developing this industry and sharing information. And that's why having podcasts, it helps in getting the information out there, because there's people that you might have never knew, Kim, if it was not for a platform like this or going and networking, you know. So this is a perfect opportunity. And sharing, you never know something, you only gain from sharing. And there's other people who might know about it, who might benefit from your experience, who might benefit from my experience. So that's the power of it. All come together and we all share. And now, Kim, we often, like you lead an executive coaching business. Can you tell us a little bit about coaching in business? Do we need to have coaching? Is it something for people who are struggling, for people who want to advance? Who is coaching for? Can you please explain it to us?
Well, those are questions I was sort of asking myself about 15 years ago, actually. And we were asked to do some coaching for one of the world's biggest cold chain companies in the US. And I was coaching from experience for some of their senior executives, but I decided to go back to school 20 odd years after doing my MBA and getting a qualification in the executive coaching area, the IECL in Sydney. And it was really instructional for me. It was challenging. It was a 3-day immersion course. And it really knocked me around, because all of the thoughts I had about why I would be a good coach or why I thought I'd been coaching well were thrown out the window, to be honest. And what it was I was coaching from my experience, and I was doing a fair bit of the talking, as opposed to, which is more mentoring, to be frank. And what I learned was executive coaching is all about being skilled and capable of being able to ask the questions and be only maybe 10% of the equation in the conversation with the coachees, the people that I was coaching, and get them to do the talking and making sure that we could get out of them what was going to be important. Of course, coaching can be, you asked whether it's for people who are highly successful or not successful. Executive coaching is a runaway industry, extremely powerful industry. Of course, there's a lot of people who probably shouldn't be in the coaching sector. There's a lot of life coaches who get mistaken for executive coaches, which is a totally different sector. And I really enjoyed the last 15 years. We have a whole coaching element, both in the Middle East and in Asia and Australia in particular, and some of the US. We're working with both the top 10%, if you like, of companies who are very highly paid executives, who have got massive responsibilities in the executive space, for developing and expanding the business, and the company wants to have those people contribute more, and or the folks that are struggling and require some support as part of their team, if you like, to help them develop the skills and the capabilities and the confidence to be able to contribute more to an organization. So coaching can be applied right across the board. There are a lot of very strong ethical standards and contracts that need to be signed, obviously, to make sure that it's a three-way street. So executive coaching is the coachee, the person who actually would enjoy or would like to reach out for coaching, the executive sponsor, which may be the GM or the MD or a director, and then the coach themselves. And that has to be clear definition of what's looking to be achieved. Yeah. And then a sign-off, a legal contract between the three, and then usually a year where only a certain amount of information with all three's agreement can be conveyed back as feedback. The rest of it's completely private and confidential during the coaching process.
Okay. And Kim, on that sense, so you are saying there is a difference. Would you say there's a difference between the performance coach and executive coach, or did they kind of morph together?
It's like anything, Stella. There are 101 or 1,001 different motivations for somebody who would like to bring on a coach, or the company or the individual that would like to bring on the coach. So I couldn't say one way or the other. It really boils down to what are the specific niche of particular areas. Are they confidence issues? Are they public speaking? Which we do, a lot of work in, because we do a lot in that space with our own conferencing and one thing and another. Or it may be more about the technical side of things. And there we might bring in also bolt-on specialists in technical areas to improve that. Generally, it's all about behavioral with executive coaching. It's about leadership versus management. It's about empathy. It's about people skills. It's about how a leader can bring a more successful impact in the business through not only their own behaviors, but of course the behaviors of those around them and those with whom they are charged with leading.
And Kim, is there a huge buyout from companies, global companies, in terms of adhering and demand really for executive coaching, or do you still see that few companies are excited or they buy into executive coaching?
Yeah, it's mainly the global tier ones and tier twos and regional tier twos and tier one companies that we serve and have been over the last 15 years. Organizations that understand the finer points of leadership development and satisfaction and helping somebody to be holistic in their career and achieve objectives in their career that they possibly didn't know that they were capable of achieving. And, on the odd occasions, people are quite hesitant about coaching because the manager or the executive, the leader, are going, "Look, I'm going to be challenged here and I'm going to fail." Whereas it's up to the coach to ensure that the company and the individual understand that the coach is there to be on their team, to help them be successful, to help them find pathways, to be asking the questions, to having sessions of challenging but not intimidating the candidate or the coachee to achieve things outside of the box and be looking at issues in a different way, looking outside the normal way of thinking to understand different parameters and different paradigms of finding solutions to the things that vex them or to challenge them or that trouble them, in fact.
Oh, thank you, Kim, for the thorough explanation in terms of executive coaching. And just now to conclude, Kim, what is one of your last words I can say to supply chain professional that you would like to share, like drops of wisdom, I can say?
I think, Stella, that passion is very important. People need to be passionate about what they're doing, and whether that's in the role that they're in or in the life that they're leading with their family, whether it's to do with sport. As you and I have spoken about, I was into some professional sport when I was younger. I've always maintained an interest, like many Kiwis, in sport. But, for me, in terms of passion, in 2000 2004, happened to be in Kenya and Africa. And long story short, but, we started up a humanitarian organization called Oasis Africa to help out 50 kids who didn't have a teacher and had no parents, mainly orphan kids. And over that period since 2004, which is nearly 20 years ago, we've educated 8,000 kids in the slums of Nairobi up to university level. So there's a good connection with Africa. And that's something we've had thousands of people have got around us. We've got corporate sponsors involved in that. It's purely humanitarian. It's registered with the Australian government for compliance and legality reasons. People get tax breaks there if they make contributions. But, I'm in and out of Africa and Kenya all the time down there participating in that. Nothing commercial in there whatsoever. It's just something that my team and myself are passionate about. We've got corporates like Maersk, like Astral Aviation from Kenya, Africa's biggest cargo airline, supporters of that organization. And it just gives you that break. So, but coming back to, recommendations for people, be passionate about what you're doing. You can't always have the dream job. You've got to work hard. You won't always be in the role that you want to be in. So work hard to get into roles that you'd like to be in. Again, do the work, dig it in, find out what your why is. What is your why? Simon Sinek. What is it you're looking to do and why you're looking to do it? Go to yourself. If you want to get a coach or, to help you do that, then go and do so.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you for the wise words. Do your work and have passion for it. So passion, it really gives you the drive and the discipline for you to continue on the path. When you know exactly where you want to go and you stick to the mission, passion drives you. It gives you that extra effort for you to go and really achieving what you really want to achieve, your dreams and your goals. And Kim, how can people get in touch with you if they want to discuss with you, they want to get in touch, they want to invite you to events? How can they do that?
Sure. Okay. So, that's a good point. I mean, I'm emceeing a lot of events, over 100 events over the last 15 years, as you know. So always happy to get involved in other people's events and contribute by being an MC or a panel host. But easy ways for me, LinkedIn, Kim Winter, KIMWINTR, as people can see there on LinkedIn, Logistics Executive Group on LinkedIn as well, and Logistics Executive, the hub of your supply chain. Between those three, there's over 250,000 followers on LinkedIn. People can get all my details off LinkedIn. They can get my email address there if they wish. And we encourage people to follow us on LinkedIn, sign up, subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is Logistics Executive Group. And we interview people like you, Stella, on Logistics Executive TV. So we post all those on LinkedIn as well.
Yes. Thank you, guys. If you have heard it, please get in touch with Kim. He's very open. He will answer you within seconds. So thank you so much.
Yeah, look, and again, anybody needs advice, we've got a team spread around the world. We're happy to try and give as much advice as we practically can. We advertise a lot of our roles up on LinkedIn as well on those three sites. So people are welcome to follow us and we share as much information. We do a lot of research. We do polls. We do all sorts of information and news we share up on LinkedIn as well.
Yes. Thank you, Kim. And so, guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you've liked it. Feel free to comment, subscribe, share this episode. You can get subscribed on our YouTube channel, Yasp_SJ, or Yas, Your African Supply Chain Podcast. We're also on LinkedIn as Your African Supply Chain Podcast. So stay tuned to our next episode, and I'll see you next time.